I want to bring in California Congressman Kevin Kiley, who recently changed his party affiliation from Republican to Independent, though he still caucuses with the Republicans. Good to have you back on the program. Appreciate you coming on, Congressman. Let me start with the fact that you did vote against the War Powers Resolution last time, but after the president's Easter threat against a whole civilization, saying it will die, and what you've seen since then, would you vote differently now?
Well, I do think that Congress needs to be centrally involved, and frankly, needs to be more involved than it has been in defining the scope of this engagement going forward. And I think that the probably most effective ways to do that are, number one, conducting oversight hearings, which we haven't had anything of, oversight of how this is being pursued, what the objectives are, what the tactics are, assuring that we're abiding by our various commitments under both U.S. and international law. And then,
can I just interrupt you there? Should that be happening after the fact?
It should be happening as it's ongoing, for sure. I mean, I think
but without prior consultation with the Congress?
So you're getting back to the question of the initial military action, which is a totally separate question that people can disagree about. I think that as the objectives were initially communicated, as they were initially defined, there has been broad, authority that has been exercised by presidents of both parties when it comes to, these sort of military engagements. But, the second point I wanted to make, in addition to doing oversight hearings, Congress is going to be asked to allocate a lot of money. And so we absolutely have the right and responsibility to say, what are these funds going to be going towards? And are they going to be used in a way that reflects where the American people are at when it comes to the scope and duration of this conflict? So the War Powers Resolution question, whether that's the most effective tool for congressional involvement isn't entirely clear, given that the president has to sign that for it to have any effect, which I think is very unlikely to happen.
Well, tell me then about the conversations you're having about the budget and the requests that are already coming in from this administration and further funding this war. And obviously, more money goes there, less money has to go elsewhere. Yeah. Are there serious conversations going on that, frankly, the outcome, the White House, the president might not like?
Yeah, I mean, Congress, this is our job, we need to dig into the amount that's being requested, whether it's the 1.5 trillion we're hearing about, whether it's the 200 billion for some sort of supplemental. And, my position is that, of course, we need to make sure that we have a robustly funded military that has maximum levels of readiness to protect our national interests. But we can't simply write blank checks. We need to look at exactly what the funds are going to be used for. We need to assure that, the strategy going forward is not likely to lead us into some sort of protracted engagement, which the American people are very much against for a variety of reasons. And also, by the way, I think we need to look at how we're actually spending our funds when it comes to the Pentagon and the military to make sure that there, like all other areas of the budget, we're doing so in a way that's efficient and respectful of the taxpayers.
Democratic Congressman Seth Moulton says more Republicans, privately talking to him, are growing concerned with the president's conduct surrounding this war. I just want to play that for folks.
Why is the talk escalating, or why was the talk escalating yesterday? I think it's because you even heard from conservative Republicans that this guy is truly crazy and dangerous, really dangerous. And I think it's when people think that he's actually dangerous that you might get some Republicans willing to do the right thing in public, even though many of them say that this guy is totally nuts behind the scenes.
Are you, Congressman, hearing similar things from the Republicans behind the scenes?
Well, there's certainly a lot of discomfort with some of the rhetoric we've seen recently. I myself put out a statement saying that the United States does not destroy civilizations, nor do we threaten to do so as some sort of negotiating tactic. And I think that, the issue here, number one, is the Iranian people have been foremost among the victims of this evil regime, which has, committed monstrous human rights abuses against women, against gay people, against their own citizens, executing tens of thousands for decades. And so we want to make sure that we are viewed by the Iranian people as being on their side and on the side of human rights and aspiring for them a future of dignity and prosperity and security. But number two, our security as Americans is built upon this sort of post-World War II consensus that has emerged and has held together somewhat fragilely and imperfectly regarding what is and is not acceptable, even within the context of war. And of course, rogue regimes like Iran don't abide by that consensus. But I think that our security is dependent upon enlarging the circle of consensus around what, around these norms. And I think that when the United States and our leaders make statements that clearly defy them, then that puts all of our security at risk.
Punchbowl News is writing, Congressman, about how prevalent the Iran war has become in the minds of the American people, not surprisingly, leading up to the midterms. This is part of what they wrote. The issue for Trump and GOP congressional leaders is whether they can somehow move beyond Iran to talk about domestic issues. And obviously, a part of the problem with that is that the war in Iran is tied so closely to the domestic issue of the economy, right? You have a very tough re-election bid, and I wonder what you're hearing, how much of a role the war is playing in your race and with others who you talk with right now.
Well, yeah, obviously it'll be important to people. I mean, the idea of some sort of long-term engagement there, I think, would not sit well with the vast majority of Americans, which is why I've been urging an expeditious end to this conflict that fulfills the objectives that we had from the outset. But you're right to point out that there is definitely a tie here to the economy, and people across the country have seen gas prices go up considerably. And even before that, people were struggling mightily with the cost of living. I'll tell you, in my state of California, we have the highest cost of living in the country. We have by far the highest gas prices in the country. Gas prices are almost $6 right now in California. In fact, the county that has the single highest gas prices of any county in the U.S., I represent that county, Mono County, but the rest of California isn't far behind. So I think that, hopefully we saw some good initial reactions in the oil markets to the ceasefire agreement. Hopefully that volatility is close to coming to an end. But I also think at the state and federal level, we need to be doing everything we can to give our taxpayers some relief. Like in Georgia, they just suspended their state's gas tax to save their citizens 30-some cents a gallon. I've been calling on our leaders in California to do the same. At a time when people are struggling so much, I think we need to be doing everything we possibly can to make life a little easier.